Hello, people. Welcome to North America. My name is Kevin Bowers. I'm so glad you're here. This is the place where we debunk the orthodoxies and the establishment narratives that are killing us. And so, in that regard, I would like to give a tip of the hat to Aaron Mate, who's I've been a fan of, and he said something on some podcast or some YouTube channel that I liked today, and I thought I would share because that's what we're all about here, sharing the wisdoms that sort of reveal the absurdity of the world in which we live and the narratives that guide us. I'm sure a lot of people out there are right pissed at Trump right now, and there's this whole impeachment buzz ago right now with the Ukraine phone call. And Aaron Mate just had a nice frame for that that I think worth repeating. In order to set the stage, he went back to Richard Nixon, who was famously impeached back in the 70s. And when I think of Richard Nixon, I don't have good thoughts, but my thoughts tend to go to Cambodia, and they tend to go to Laos, and they go to Vietnam, where he bombed the shit out of those countries illegally, behind the backs of Congress. He lied about it, and he just a reign of terror where literally millions of people died. And I was in Laos at one point in my life, and there was a bar that I went to in Luang Prabang called Utopia, and it was actually built out of spent armaments that had fallen from the sky during that conflict in the Middle East. Conflict, that's a bad word. It was a war. It was an all-out murderous freak show of a war. And the Americans dropped more bombs on Laos than, I forget the statistic, but it's like mind-boggling. Anyway, so there's this bar I'm at called Utopia that was built with bombs that were unexploded ordnances that were in the countryside where I was traveling. So the fuckery of Richard Nixon was immense and immoral to a degree that is sort of hard to get your head around. And yet, Aaron Mate makes the fine point that this is not why he was impeached. He was impeached because he did some spying on some other Democratic, the DNC at the time in the Watergate hotel room, and he was caught doing it, and he was caught lying about it, and then he was impeached for it. So in the scale of evil, somehow the killing of 1 million people is outweighed by a break and enter. The break and enter is the thing that gets you impeached in America. That's the thing that brings the country to its knees and changes the trajectory of a nation. A break and enter. A bombing and the killing of 1 million people didn't rise to that occasion. That's weird, man. And it's also obvious, right? It's one of those things where you sort of know the details of the story, but you don't necessarily make sense of the story. Because that story doesn't make sense. It's absurd. It's absurd. And one can sort of guess as to why the one story, the DNC breaking in of the hotel room, the Republicans breaking into the hotel room, gets bigger play, and that's because the party that impeached them also bombed Vietnam and is engaged in all sorts of horrors of war. So in fact, they're in favor of it. So to ask them to impeach on the real evil becomes an impossibility because they are complicit in that very evil. They're rooting for it. They're voting for it. So you get this bizarre situation where what's actually criminal, and what I mean by that, what actually gets acted upon as a crime, are the things where an establishment figure gets wronged. So someone else in the establishment, in this case the Democratic Party, gets wronged. That is the rationale to change the course of a nation. So, fast forward to the Ukrainian thing, and this is just post-Russiagate thing, where there was impeachment chatter for some time. And once again, we're talking about impeachment not for any great sort of historic and sort of outsized evil, but for a chat with the Ukrainian president, in which he sort of suggests that he would, get some investigation into this Biden character. Well, certainly it might be like slightly bad, but on the scale of what Trump has done and what we know him to do, it is such a slight. It is such a small thing. And if you would like to defend this move because you hate Trump so much that and you think this is a real affront to democracy, be careful. Because he also is committing a genocide in Yemen right now. And he, with your tax dollars, is spending a shit ton of money giving weapons to Saudi Arabia to do that. And by the way, Saudi Arabia is cutting off the heads of gay men and women in their town squares. All of which is illegal. And which is way worse than having a conversation and saying, maybe you could look into this Biden character for me. But the people in the resistance, the people that are sort of shooting for an impeachment of Trump, seem to be strangely happy to avoid the huge target of his real criminal, evil agenda, and are interested in the phone call. That's a problem. That's a problem where you got to sort of look in the mirror and go, why is it that is the thing that's got me glued to my television set and rooting for the end of Trump? There's lots of reasons to root for the end of Trump. There are great evils perpetrated in his administration. And by the way, full disclosure, I'm all for impeaching Trump for those things. Problem is, I would have also been in favor of impeaching Obama for bombing Yemen and for drone striking. He killed, I think I got to get this number right, Obama, this is something you got to get your head around, 26,000 bombs were dropped in 2016 under Obama's watch. 200, did I get that right? 216,000 bombs were dropped in his watch. I think I got that right. I'll put the thing underneath if I'm close, but I'm improvising these things. That's like a certain number of bombs an hour. I'm not sure what it is, but it was a shit ton of bombing. I would impeach Obama for that, and would you not? Trump undoubtedly bombs at a rate greater than that. He should be impeached for that as well. But our partisanship should not sort of be a wedge between us and our ethical stances. They both should be impeached. Noam Chomsky was quite clear on this point, right? That if the Nuremberg Nuremberg laws were used correctly, every president, since I don't know what he said, Eisenhower would have been guilty and hung, I think, under the Nuremberg laws. Thanks, Noam. Right? Like, that's just like a nice, not nice. I guess it's nice in the fact that it's true, right? And so here we are with this impeachment thing. We're all getting gung-ho about impeaching him because if you're watching North of America, I presume you're already sort of like not on the side of the Republican Party. But a little bit of context and you see the slippery slope of the narrative. And we see the idea that we've been told to be angry about Trump's flippant regard for democracy, and this fear that the Russians are changing the election and all that stuff, influencing our elections, and now, my goodness, it's happening in Ukraine again. We're told to be very upset about that, yet we are conveniently not sort of spun into dismay and horror by the bombing of Yemen. Worth considering. And Aaron Mate, thanks for doing the good work. I'm here on North of America because, partially because Aaron Mate is awesome, and he's awesome with a few other people, for damn sure. But it's pretty rare. You got to dig a little bit to find that kind of clarity, that kind of upsetting overturning of narrative in the media landscape, and even online. It's not all that easy to find voices that have sort of disentangled themselves sufficiently from the sort of agenda setters that you can sort of see them objectively. And once you do, you get this sort of smack of absurdity. Wow, that's something. The break and enter in Watergate outweighed the illegal bombing of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam as a cause for overturning Richard Nixon. Same is happening right now, my friends, in this Trump situation. So here in North America, this is our mandate. Let's overturn those stories. Let's get wise to the ways that our heartstrings are being pulled, that our reason is being sort of futzed with, and let's keep the optimism that if we sort of ratchet into these narratives and expose the absurdity of these lies and the grandeur of the deceit, once you see the grandeur of the lies that has been sort of spun in your consciousness and in your heart, we stand a damn good chance of not being duped. And we can't be duped any longer, my good people. I will often bring these things back to climate change because, to me, that's the one issue that is sort of, well, it's a cliff, right? It's the one issue, and perhaps the nuclear Armageddon is another, right? Where it's just like you hit the wall, and it's unimaginable pain and suffering. If we can unprogram ourselves sufficiently to see the lies and to care about the things that we should care about and not get tangled in the soap opera sort of shadow puppets that we're told to care about, we could actually affect change. I'm optimistic that humans are sufficiently intelligent, sufficiently rational, and sufficiently open-minded and empathetic that they will act when they have been able to sort of take the steering wheel on the narratives and see the world for what it is. One thing we do know, people, is that propaganda works. It's a very effective tool, and these people are very good at it. So we're going to need a little bit of guerrilla work, right, to sort of like ratchet open the lies. And Aaron Mate's doing that work. And sort of a tip of the hat to you, Aaron. Let's keep unpacking this. Thanks so much for joining me. North of America. Join northofamerica.net. There's a blog there with a bunch of writing on it, and there's more videos to be had. I'm going to keep pumping this stuff out. So glad you're here to stay. Well, I hope you're here to stay.